And today we have a very, very special guest on the podcast, Sydney Mays. She is the 2024 Only Poems Poet of the Year.
The haiku, for instance. I love haiku and
big haiku fan.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, obviously you're not Madam C.J. Walker, but like you do.
You don't know that,
feel
Phil.
That's true. That's true.
So to get a little woo-woo, all poems start in the body, right?
Let's go beyond the first page. Let's go beyond the first page.
Welcome back, Second Pagers. This is Beyond the First Page podcast with siblings Phoebe, Phil, and Isaac. I'm Phoebe.
I'm Phil.
I'm Isaac.
And today we have a very, very special guest on the podcast, Sydney Mays. She is the 2024 Only Poems Poet of the Year. She is currently attending Vanderbilt. She is in her second year receiving her MFA, and she is originally from Denver, Colorado. She holds a BA in English and Creative Writing from the University of Iowa, and her poem, The Walker System, won the 2024 Academy of American Poets Prize. Her poems have appeared and or are forthcoming in the Atlantic Booth, the Iowa Review blog, the Indianapolis Review, Denver Quarterly, and the Prairie Schooner. That is a very impressive bio for such a young woman. Sydney, thank you so much for being on the podcast and welcome.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here and to talk about poems.
Yeah, us too, for sure. And this is a good time to mention that we are by no means poetry experts. We just love to read and love literature and are very excited to talk to you about your art. And yeah, thank you again. We always like to start with a little icebreaker. And so it's usually some sort of literary question, but doesn't always have to be. We really want to do a fast food one with Phil, what his favorite fast food is, but he won't reveal that yet until he's tried them all. So stay tuned for that on a later episode.
It's a real journey my wife and I have been on.
Yeah. So, but for today, I've been big into icks. And so I wanted to hear what everyone's literary ick was. And I'll go first. Mine is and Isaac knows this well, he recommended me a book called The Ministry for the Future. And it's kind of a post-apocalyptic story about global warming. So basically the earth is falling apart due to global warming. And that is the post-apocalyptic, when it's too real for something like global warming, is just an ick for me. I can't finish those books. It's too frightening. I know I should probably read them to take it more seriously, but I gotta escape from reality. And so that's the literary ick for me. And I'll pass it over to you next, Sydney. What's your literary ick?
Oh, okay. So I do a lot of editing work, and so I see a lot of poems that come to me that are like center justified. And it is such a poet ick. Like it drives me up the wall. Because why is it in the center? I don't understand. Like left, I don't know. Left justified is where it's at. I feel really, really strongly about that. And then I think in terms of like contemporary works, like I love short story collections, and I love when they are not linked. I think everyone wants to write a linked short story collection right now. And I just think that like sometimes things should exist on their own, and that not all the characters have to like appear in each short story. So those are my icks.
Those are two really good ones. The center justified is like so niche for a poet, I feel like, but it's so good. Isaac, what about you?
Mine is more about the writing style, and for our faithful listeners, I've talked about this a couple times, but when you are reading from the main view of a character and it's like they know that they are the main character of a story, so their words like are just so unnatural, and their inner thoughts, and then their dialogue also proceeds to be very unnatural. Some examples of this were like a little bit Martyr, and I know I talked about this with Noelle, and then also just like the My Sister's Keeper that we also read on the podcast, by Jodi Picoult, the mostly like the dad's thoughts.
Yeah.
Just like over the top. So that's mine.
Too much main character energy, perhaps.
Yeah.
So what about you?
Yeah, mine is when little kids are just way too developed. When people are just like Rickon Stark as 3 doing all the shit that he does is so annoying. It's just like 3-year-old, super unnecessary too, where you could just change the age to 4 or 6. And it's just like, why? Why did you do this? So that's annoying to me.
Yeah.
Or like when a
Well,
4-year-old knows like what tax evasion is. It's just like, what?
That's very niche. But
Again, very niche. Yeah.
yes. No, that's true. I mean, unrealistic characters, I think, in general, are very annoying. But in particular, kids, I definitely agree with you. I thought you were going to say multi-point of view. I feel like a lot of fantasy, Cindy, what you said kind of reminded me of multi-point of view. Like, can we just have a single point of view novel being written right now? But say lovey. I feel like these trends come and go. So. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that was fun. I feel like Isaac was a bit hesitant to share. He was like, let's not make it negative, but I kind of think it's funny. So I feel like it played out well. Thanks for playing along with us, Cindy. It was funny.
I think it's like if you have an ick, you're paying attention, which I think is so. It's like you're reading, that's positive, and then if you have something that you're like, ooh, I don't like that, it means that you've created taste and that you're interested in literature, which I love. So it's kind of positive if you think about it that way.
It's a great.
Yeah, I really like that spin. Yeah. Wish I had thought of that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, so we really try to summarize anything that we've read for our listeners, maybe if it's been a minute since they've read whatever book we're discussing, or if it was kind of a convoluted plot line. In this case, though, we were really hoping that you would read the Walker system for us. I think it's such a unique opportunity to get read the poem by the author. And so we're really hoping that you would do that for us and our listeners.
So I'm going to read my poem, The Walker System. Denver, Colorado, 1906. And on that day, George Andrew found gold at Clear Creek and all my people got rich. If you skin a dog, a good breed, color of damp wood or jukebox love, a shepherd or a coonhound, you can make a decent pomade from the silvery liquid between liver and rib. In my bag of bones, arthritis in one hip, a pan and pick bedazzled with my first husband's spine, a Great Dane's jawbone, my daughter's molar kissed, not knocked, from her mouth like the history books say, and for good luck, a varnished pig's foot on a thick gold chain. Out in the sticks, tender-headed, the two-toothed child digging pyrite out from river-scored fingertips. Dry, the air, the earth flawless and colored, the back of my hand. Out here in coyote country, I go long nights licking snuff with nostrils flared tongue. I emboss my money with the moniker Madam. I wave in the pebble-webbed hair of miners' wives, argan oil and sweet jelly. Change out of my good shoes to preach the gospel of a good shampoo and supplication. I say to the damp-faced gals, sagged from a first or fourth child, I say, come, hear a bit of pre-employment wisdom. To skin a dog, bitter yourself with men and figs. To make a good life, mix only petroleum and sulfates into inherited ceramic. To keep a sack of gold swinging from your tit, follow the white man who followed the black folks, who followed the waxwing, who follows only that which sustains and gleams.
Wow.
Dang. Thank you.
That's so cool hearing
much better than what I did in my head.
Yeah.
Or when I tried to read out loud. Wow. I'm kind of speechless, honestly, right now.
I grew up in the church, and so there was a lot of performance, a lot of like reading Bible verses, and funny enough, Kava Akbar was my mentor in undergrad, and he told me,
so cool.
That's insane.
Yeah,
of course, this is why I didn't want to do the Ix. I just diss her mentor on the podcast.
No. I mean, we all have our opinions about everything, so it's not. I don't feel any kind of way about that. At least you read the book. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but he always said that you can always tell when a poet read the King James Bible growing up. There's like a certain sonics to it and the certain way that people read their poems. So I think some of that is just from how I grew up and what I being used to reading and performing in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it was honestly just like I thought I knew what it was supposed to be about, and now I'm questioning like all of the things that have gone through my head. I think reading it out loud too is so interesting. Like I read it a few times in my head, and then I read it out loud, nothing like that, and I got something so different. And it really makes me. I think one of the biggest things when I'm reading poetry is I'm just hanging on a little bit, and I'm trying to get anything out of it. And I like even just a small message or something, a takeaway, the way that the language is used, a new word, anything. And I'm wondering for you as a poet and as the author of that poem and other poems, if you're happy with the reader taking anything away, or if you're really hoping that they get what you maybe intended the poem to mean.
Well, Phoebe, us poets, we get lucky when someone reads our poems. So I think that like if someone's sitting down and like taking 5 minutes out of their life to read a poem, that's like one of the most exciting things I can think about. Um, because it's a tough genre for so many people. It feels inaccessible. You're kind
Mhm.
of you're met with oftentimes received forms, like particular kinds of repetition, images that can kind of be difficult to parse, and it can be difficult, right? So
Mhm.
for me, the fact that someone's like taking the time to read a poem is all I really want them to get out of it. Would I love it if like everyone understood every reference in the poem, like especially the Walker system, because it's about Madam C.J. Walker, and I did a lot of research, so I want everyone to notice everything. But if someone even just likes a sound that was created by the patterning of language, then that's awesome for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great to hear. And also I want to expand upon the like what was behind the true meaning, but I wanted to out Isaac and Phil since you've already said what the meaning of the
Oh,
poem
I'm
was.
sorry.
No, that's great. I think it's like very happy you said that up front. I try to go in a lot of times with the podcast to just take things at face value. So I did no research other than like about you a bit before talking to you. So I'll just be honest. I didn't know it was about Madam C.J. Walker. I thought it was about maybe I obviously knew it was about out West, and I thought it was about making a home remedy. To be honest with you, that was my initial takeaway. And then it was about a community. But that was my takeaway. I'm curious now if Isaac and Phil would maybe share what their takeaway was.
Yeah, so I just visited my great aunt actually in the hospital. She's at Vanderbilt. She's doing fine now. But it just was a lot of her vibe, I
Mm.
guess. She probably has arthritis, probably feels that her body is just sometimes a bag of bones, but she I don't know. Like, yeah, Phoebe said community. She was maybe not imparting wisdom as much as like the main character in your poem, but sort of she knows what's up. And I think you lose this patronizing tone when you're that old. Maybe you're like patronizing your 70s, but then once you get the 90s, you're just like, this is how it is. And I that's like a lot of the vibes that I got out of this poem. I think what I love about what you were just saying, though, is that it sounds a lot like Salvador Dali's artwork, where you're just like you appreciate it, like the melting clocks one, and you're like that is super cool. And then you read all of his crap behind this, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the most intricate thing I've ever. I appreciated it, and then getting the deep meaning is super cool. And I think that's why I love poetry and art, because it's so small, and it's a small enough portion that you can do that. You can also do it with something like Ulysses, but it will take your entire life plus then some. And so that's why I like poetry. It's digestible, but it's so deep.
So I didn't associate it with my aunt, but I did associate, like, I had this image in my head of like this medicine woman figure
Mhm.
in there is a mining town kind of like mentioned, so that easily puts you in like a sense. And then
Right.
something I thought was cool about this poem and some of your other poems that you do, the like, I don't know what it's called, but the heading kind of like in this one, it's
Oh yeah.
Denver, Colorado, 1906. And then in Golden Glosso Squeegee, there's the Toni Morrison quote, and then American Sonnet in the Coleman, LA. So you can, what is that called? Like,
I don't think there's a name for it.
oh, okay. It's just like an artistic flair.
It's like a little. Here you go. I'm giving you a little bit more context.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but for that, for this poem, it put me right into this frontier setting. And then I just had this image of this medicine woman in a little village, providing advice. And I kind of got it out like, you have to work hard and get a little lucky. And
Yeah.
then things will hopefully, work out for you is kind of what I got out of it.
I think all of you are right, though. I will say this sort of like the voice is coming from my own grandmother, who was
Oh.
one of those women who was very direct, but also she was really funny, and
Mhm.
so that comes from there. And um, Madam C.J. Walker. So growing up in Denver, Colorado, there's not a lot of Black people,
Mhm.
and she's the only Black woman that was taught in our Colorado history class, and she only lived in Denver for about 4 years. So
Mm.
that kind of tells you what they thought about Black Colorado history. And it's expansive, but that's neither here nor there. And my mom also owns a salon, and Madam C.J. Walker was creating like
She
tinctures
was the
and
first
pomades.
millionaire, right?
Yeah.
She was the
Yep.
first Black millionaire. She was really instrumental in Black banking in the US. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So she's like a figure that's always kind of loomed over my life, and the fact that my mom did hair. So I think in a lot of ways it is that sort of matrilineal line, like uh, who's teaching, who's preaching, who's letting you know what's up. And also hair for us, I think, is so healing, right? It is a sort of like medicinal space to be taken care of in that way. And so I don't know, I think it's really, really lovely to hear what you all got from it and like what you associated it with, because I don't know, it validates a lot of like what is put into the poem that's not on the page, right? All that family history, all that cultural history that is still arriving, um, even if it doesn't necessarily say that's what's going on right at the surface. So I'm really grateful for y'all's readings.
I feel like that kind of goes like pretty well into one of the main questions I had for you. When you are, because so we started this podcast last year and we did a poem last year as well. And I think we will try to keep doing that going forward. And just for our, like me personally and even Phil's growth and then our listeners that follow along, when you are looking at your poems, either yours or a new piece of poetry,
Mhm.
what is your analytical method?
So I might be a little unique in this, but whenever I read a poem, I don't try to understand what's happening right away. I think that in writing, I kind of have forced myself, like, I don't need to know what's going on right now, but do I feel
Mhm.
something, right? And then I come back to the poem and then I put on my like investigator's hat and I'm like, okay, what's happening here? Is there repetition? What does repetition mean, right? Like, if a writer feels that it is so important to keep saying this thing over and over and over again within the poem, what is that saying about the feeling there? And then
Mhm.
looking at the language that's used. To say something in a poem is good is one thing, but if the writer says that it's spectacular, what is the connotation of that? And so for me, just kind of looking at the emotions that the language evokes as well. That's kind of how I come to poems. And also, I think as readers, our lived experience only goes so far. And I try really hard to be a well-researched reader. If I don't understand something, I want to go look it up. And even if I still don't understand it after I look it up, like I've like made the attempt. So yeah, that's kind of how I approach reading other people's poems. Reading my own, I just go, whew, thank God it's done. I don't think too hard about it afterwards. I just,
But
you
poems
know.
does seem like a kind of one of those works of art where you could nitpick it to death. Kind of
Forever.
feel like it is never done. Do you have a way of being like, okay, this is it, like I have to stop, or do you find it pretty easy to see like that is what I wanted?
If I have two modes. I have like sports car mode where I write the poem and then I'm like, I did it, amazing, I'm done, and I don't ever touch it again. And then I just like let it rock. And then I have poems where I can't see the potential in them. And so I first like bring them to a trusted friend. My roommate Langston is a writer. He writes short stories and he's also really invested in language. So he's coming to it from a fiction writer's perspective, but he also like loves words the way I love words. And if Langston doesn't get it, that's when I go back and I'm like, okay, what don't you understand? What isn't working? Where do you feel like the mechanisms in the poem feeling weak? Like where are you like lost emotionally? And then that's when how I'm able to go back in and rework the stuff.
Wow. That's so nice. You have a Langston. That's
I
awesome.
love him. He's the best. Everybody needs a Langston.
Yeah. I loved what you said about like being a well-researched reader. And so I looked up the waxwing because I was
I did
wondering
too,
if
Phoebe.
there was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was wondering kind of like it's what I was getting like glimpse, when you're doing a Google search, you get like pulled in so many directions. But the one thing was saying like maybe it wasn't about your poem. Like I didn't say like what does she mean in this, but I just said what is the waxwing, and then like what is the significance of a waxwing. One said it liked shiny objects, and so it went for that. And then the other one was saying it was like a reference to Icarus, like flying too close to the sun. But I think that was like in reference to wax like melting off a wing.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Isaac, what did you find in that?
So I thought a
Did you find the
waxwing
same,
was
or-
a bug. So
Oh.
once I saw that it was a bird, I was like, okay, I just had to look up at what it was. I didn't go that deep of the
Right.
meaning of it. Yeah.
Like what was this?
But
Why the waxwing?
I mean, in the poem it says it follows only which sustains and gleams. So I just sort of like just jumped to the conclusion that it was one of those dirt birds that like goes after shiny stuff.
Great things. Yeah.
When I have to write a poem about the waxwing bug, because I love writing about bugs. I don't think that's like apparent in a lot of like my published work, but I'm obsessed with writing about bugs. I love moths. I'm terrified of moths. I have monophobia. I'm terrified of them. I love writing about them. I love writing about bugs. But for me, the waxwing, it's bright and yellow. And like you said, Phoebe, it's one of those birds that really is attracted to shiny things in a way that we typically associate with corvids. So like crows, magpies, those sorts of birds. They don't actually like shiny things. Funny enough, that's kind of
A myth.
yes, exactly. It's a myth. And also, my friends kind of call me the bird lady. I love birds too.
Have you read Amy Tan's bird book?
I have.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm making a
the
note.
Backyard Bird Chronicles.
It's just so unassuming and like pure too. It's a really good read.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I'm excited now. That'll be my June reading.
Yeah.
So I think that leads sort of to my question. We noticed a lot of your poems have very interesting structures. Nashville is sort of broken, and one side is left indented and one side is right indented, or the website just messed it up. I think a lot of what I get out of your poems, these like the feels, but then you use words like Paleozoic, which is just like if I had to simplify emotion to somebody, I would never use Paleozoic, but I like still get it. Like, I guess, how do you pick that structure and how do you play with the words in such a way that you get the meaning across? But also, I think something is added with Paleozoic. That is super cool.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna start answering the word question because I think the question about structure is a little different for me. Oftentimes, and I've got like Nashville, Tennessee in front of me. Two things about me is that when I was 8 years old, I asked for sets of thesauruses, like thesaurus. Is that the plural? Yeah. So I've like always loved knowing that there's a perfect word for something. Like there's an exact word to describe this exact thing. I feel really strongly about the word pyrite for that reason, because like fool's gold is great and it functions and it works. But pyrite is so specific. I love specificity. And I love being able to have access to specificity. And so part of that is just like those little special interests appearing in the poems. Lots of birds, lots of rocks. So a lot of the newer poems have bugs in them. And also, I think the thing about the natural world for me is that it supplies an endless amount of exactitude, right? If you're thinking about the color red, there's a bird out there that has the exact shade of red that you're trying to talk about. And then that can enter the poem, right? So
Mhm.
there's an exact phrase for every single thing. And that, I think, really drives me, the pursuit of that.
I feel like that is a slippery slope to other languages. I was thinking specifically German, you have like the one word for the guy who has a face that deserves to be punched or whatever. That's a
Right.
great word. So how do you, have you ever considered sort of straying into other languages or?
I used to speak a bit of Italian. I took it in college. So I think I'm a little inspired by it. But I think for me, I have access to two languages, right? Like I have access to African American Vernacular English, so the dialect, right? And then I have access to Standard English. And so for me, I constantly get to play with two languages
Yeah.
that I know really, really well. And so far that's enough for me. That and I guess maybe three languages, right? Like I love research, I love the scientific, I love those sorts of exact words, right? So there's a wealth within the broad spectrum of the English language that I can play with. And also, who has time to learn another language?
Yeah, facts. Facts.
I wish I did, but
Yeah.
My wife
yeah.
is a fluent Spanish speaker and I still have not found the time. So
Dang, yeah, true.
I was going to say, like, yeah, could you talk a little bit about the structure in Nashville and then also all of the poems that we read of yours, though, like, very different.
Hmm.
And I personally love the all lowercase. So I
Mhm.
don't know what the intention is for that, but I have, in my very limited poetry reading, I've always loved, I think that is just like very cool in
Hmm.
general. But yeah, just the structure of the poems and how you get to that and any meaning behind it, I guess.
It depends. So thinking about so the Walker system is in a prose block, and some of okay, so when I'm thinking about structure for my poems, I'm often thinking about how do I want my reader to read the poem. And I think for me, the prose block offers momentum. You're going through it, you're moving through it. And so then when you finally get to what sustains and gleams, it kind of stops in the middle of the page and you're stopped, right? You're stopped in the momentum. And so you get to kind of like live with what is being said at the end. In the Nashville poem, I wanted it to feel kind of extended, right? You have to forgive line break the snow for its waking, right? So you're kind of having to be jerked through the poem a little bit. And then you're pushed. I think like Phil was saying, it's not a website mistake. I meant to do that. Is to put them on opposite sides, right? Because the perspective changes. So to indicate that visually. And so some of what is on the page is meant to help the reader get through the poem in the way that I'm intending it to be gotten through.
Yeah.
And then some of the other poems are in forms. So I think, Isaac, you brought up the Golden Glossa, and that is two forms. So the glossa is a 15th century Spanish form where you're taking a line from another writer and that line ends each 10 line stanza, four stanzas. And
Hmm.
then the golden shovel was invented by the poet Terence Hayes, which I recommend him if you're just getting into poetry. His I think his work is really wonderful, and he created this form where he took a Gwendolyn Brooks poem, the "We real cool, we skip school,
yeah.
we jazz June," yeah, and so then the right spine of the poem is the Gwendolyn Brooks poem. So that poem for me, the Golden Glossa, is a hybrid of those two forms. And I think for me, if I'm putting something in a received form or a hybridized form, I'm doing it because I'm trying to push myself to use words that I would not use if I just
Hmm.
sat down at the page in the way that like would happen with the Walker system or with Nashville, right? Those are poems where I'm just like, I noticed something today, I'm going to write about it. Or I was thinking about Madam C.J. Walker, I'm going to write about it. But the form kind of forces you into a perspective that you wouldn't automatically reach for. Like that poem is about my mom and uncle's relationship. I
Hmm.
don't ever really write about the two of them as a unit. And so, but the Golden Glossa kind of demanded that I did something a little different. So,
That's
If that
really
makes sense.
cool. I've never heard.
Yeah.
So I read the transcript of your interview with one of the interviews online, and then I stopped reading because I didn't want to like spoil like getting to know you, I guess, kind of. But the interviewer must have known poetry more than us, because they
I think
were
that's
like
everybody.
referencing the golden shovel in the gloss as like a form. I'm like, oh, this is like a kind
The
of poem,
thing.
but I didn't know what it
Yeah.
was. That's another form of art in and of itself. Just
Yeah, it's
the
so cool.
yeah, that's wild.
I mean, that's why
Yeah.
there's formalists, right? There are people who specialize in doing that. And sometimes I'm a formalist. I moonlight as a formalist. Because I just think that it's so much fun. Like the haiku, for instance. I love haiku
Cool.
and
Big
Really
haiku
is
fan.
too.
yes, okay. I could talk about haiku for hours. I spent
We
2
should have
weeks on
opened
it.
with that.
Yes.
They all of the haikus at my wedding were all the haikus that I wrote to my wife were at every table.
It
Yeah,
was
it was
actually
very,
one of the cutest. I'm not big into like romance. It was the cutest thing ever. It was so freaking cute.
That's beautiful. Oh
It
my
really was.
God. Ah. Okay, well we'll have to have our own little moment to talk haiku. Um, but each form demands something different of you. The haiku demands that you ruminate and that you capture a moment and hold it in the 3 lines, right? The golden shovel demands that you reach back into the archive, into the literary archive, and you say, okay, I'm going to honor this person. In that poem, I'm honoring Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, which is my favorite novel. And so, yeah, the sonnet, I think a lot of times it's changed over the years what it's meant to honor, but it's a little song, right? Like you're sort of distilling, I think, the romance of melody into a poem, right? And so yeah, so I'm really attracted to form. I study form. That's like my specialization, I would say, if I had to say I had one. But it's not the only thing I do. But it's a thing I do.
yeah,
Okay.
no, that's super cool. First of all, I want to say it before Isaac says it, but we read this book about Vincent van Gogh that was just dreadful. But one of the things that he's obsessed with is the it. And Isaac's it is when people are passionate about something. And I can tell from just like Isaac, he's like now into poetry,
Yeah.
which is great. Which is great because we have this family tradition where we write each other poems every year on Christmas to find the gifts, like the clue poems. And Phoebe and Isaac hate it, and I love it, and I can't wait for them to appreciate it more. So
So much
thank you for
more.
that.
I'm doing
Yes.
a
There we
golden
go.
shovel next year.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you for clarity's sake, a formalist is somebody who adheres to specific forms of a poem, or they make it their total art to follow like a specific type of poem. Is that true? Or maybe you should just say it so I don't confuse people.
No, you're good. There's a couple of different types, but I think the most distilled way to say it is that a formalist is a poet who is interested in writing in received form, so forms
Okay.
that they didn't create necessarily.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
I don't know. Sometimes being a formalist is like really stuffy. We're on Vanderbilt campus, and the new critics were very interested in form and sort of like form as keeping things traditional and not making space for people to experiment and try new things. So that's why I say I moonlight as a formalist, because I try not to be stuffy, but I do like to put things in containers.
I don't find your poetry stuffy by any means. So, yeah, I think the only other thing I wanted to say, something from our conversation earlier has been sticking in my brain a bit. I really enjoyed getting to hear kind of the backstory of the Walker system. I just think it's very interesting. And now, like thinking back on some of the lines, the like ode to the hair and the pomade, and I wanted to kind of bring that up with also recognizing, like we only know what we know from where we're coming from. And I think it was interesting and really cool to talk to you about like where you came from and why what you were seeing there and why it was in the poem. So yeah, that was really
Do
sticking.
you
with
write
that
everything
connection.
personally? I guess what Phoebe's trying to get, like, is that one of the things that RJ Barker said was like he doesn't like to tell stories that aren't his.
Mm.
So I guess how I mean, obviously you're not Madam C.J. Walker, but like you do
You don't know that,
feel
Phil.
that's true. That's true. That's true. So like I guess how do you channel like how do you balance those where you want to tell a story, but I mean you're in your 20s and you haven't lived every story.
I think that okay, so to get a little woo woo, all poems start in the body, right? They start in your experience and what you've been through. The Walker system specifically, I have no idea what 1906 was like. I can do research until my eyes bleed, but I'll never fully comprehend that experience, right?
Mhm.
And so it's kind of taking what facts I have access to, mixing them with what I know, right? Which is, I think, some of that mother-daughter relationship, like having a parent who's like who does hair, and who's invested in that work, and who, in a lot of ways, like held a position. My mom was always very important in every room she walked in. She's an
Mhm.
incredible person, and so kind of being the child in that shadow, I think, is something that is snuck into that poem just a little bit. But all of that is arriving in the poem, whether I want it to or not. And I think that's the fun thing about persona poems, which the Walker system is one, is that you arrive in the poem even if like the biographical facts of the poem don't belong to you. My thesis project is about a homestead in Denver, Colorado, an all-black homestead called Deerfield. So again, I'm in the 1910s, 1920s. I'm writing about the Dust Bowl a little bit, and I have no idea what it was like. I've never farmed a day in my life. I think I'd break a nail and I'd be devastated. So, but I'm bringing to it like a lifetime of labor. Even though I am very young, I've worked since I was 14. I had 3 jobs while I was in undergrad. I've always been in doing some kind of work, and homesteading required constant work. So bringing sort
Right.
of that experience then into the persona work, and yeah, so of course all the poems are me. I wrote them, but they're also me applied to different facts, and even the ones that are about like my life, like Nashville, Tennessee. That poem is a little fabricated and a little me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's super
that's
cool.
really cool to hear. Yeah. We are not going to rate the poems. I think it's like kind of
No, I think you should.
I mean,
Let's go.
I just feel like it's so open to like rating a poem just seems so wrong. It's like rating a piece of art. But if I had to rate this conversation, it would be 5 out of 5 for me. I think
Mhm.
I don't know how to like eloquently say this, but you made I think a situation that I felt maybe a little bit unqualified talking about very approachable. I hope that I know that will come through for our listeners, and you were able to sneak
Thank
in
you.
some really good tidbits about poems throughout. I learned a lot through our discussion. I know Isaac and Phil did as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to share quickly with our listeners what they would like if they enjoyed your poems and maybe want to read something else. And I kind of did this based off the like medicine woman, like making an herbal kind of brew, for lack of a better term, that I took away from the Walker system. And I wanted to recommend Night Watch by Jane Ann Phillips. We read it actually on the podcast. And while I think for me, some of the story wasn't always there, I think it was a good story. And there's a character, Dervla, in the book who reminds me a lot of the main character or presence in the Walker system. So that's what I would recommend. It was a 2024 Pulitzer winner as well.
Oh,
So
nice.
definitely worth the read, even if none of that speaks to you. I think it's interesting to read and enjoy. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Isaac, what about you?
So I'm actually feeling so justified in this recommendation.
I love that for you.
So I'm recommending Pride. It's the song by U2. And Dierks Bentley also does a cover of this song, which I really like. And so this is why I'm feeling so justified. I didn't even know the Walker system was about the Madam C.J. Walker, but I feel like that is even better for my recommendation now. And then the Nashville had just like a very similar vibe. You know, he sings about Memphis and the assassination of Martin Luther King. So I just had that kind of sort of tie to it, that Tennessee Southern tie. We read this song as a poem in my eighth grade or seventh grade English class. And I still like I don't remember what grade it was, but I remember like doing it and analyzing it. And it has always like stuck with me. So that's my recommendation, and I'm just like
Is the
so
one about
thrilled
his
that-
dad?
No, it's
Is the one
about the
about his dad?
assassination of Martin Luther King
Oh, interesting.
Jr.
Sydney, I'll pass it over to you to do a recommendation. If people like your poetry, what else should they read?
Okay. I think you should read the poems of Kaveh Akbar.
Okay.
They're really good, and the way that he uses language really, really inspired me when I was a baby poet. So before I even met him, I was like obsessed with his poetry, specifically the collection "Calling a Wolf a Wolf." I will also recommend my favorite novel of all time, which is Song of Solomon. I love that book. Toni Morrison is at her best, and you can quote me on that. I'll die on that hill. I think it's her best. And I love that book because of it's like multiple meditations on like what it means to be black, and like also what it means to be a black woman, which I think to me just resonates a lot. Um, Okay, and then I'm gonna do one more. I'm sorry. And then the poet Danica Kelly has a book coming out in October called The Natural Order of Things. And I think if you like animals and bugs, you should you should read her work. And also because I think her work is is such a great entrance place into poetry. If
Cool.
it's something that you're new to, like I think those poems are accessible, but they're also filled with so much depth. I really love Danica Kelly's work. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, those are great recommendations. I will definitely read Song of Solomon. It sounds like something I would love.
We did Beloved last year, and I think we all really liked it. I have heard Song of Solomon is better, but my recommendations would be The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. I think The Wasteland is I think T.S. Eliot just like sort of rocks on vibes. So I think that's like a lot of, I think Sydney's poems also rock on vibes. So
I'm going to go to every single person in my MFA and say that someone compared me to T.S. Eliot in The Wasteland, and I'm gonna have cool points forever and ever and ever. I feel so lucky to be like in conversation with him. So thank you.
Yeah. Really quickly before we go, we always like to talk about what we're reading next time. And so this was a fan pick for the podcast, and it's called We Do Not Part. It's by Han Kang. And Isaac, could you just give us a brief overview of that novel?
Yeah, and we'll also have another guest for this episode discussing We Do Not Part, our great friend, Bo Stewart, who has been a long
We
time
convinced him
supporter
to talk
of
to us.
reading, in a local Ligonier legend. So We Do Not Part is a book about the Jeju massacre of 1948. And the story follows a writer who travels to Jeju Island to take care of her friend's pet bird. And it leads her to having to confront a lot of historical atrocities that happen there. Novel blends historical events with personal experiences and creates a haunting and lyrical narrative that examines the enduring impact of trauma and the search for connection in the face of loss.
and she is the most recent Nobel Literature winner.
Correct.
So
Oh, interesting. Cool. I read another novel about Jeju Island, so I'm excited to read this one as well. Before we go, Sydney, I just want to thank you again so much. I think this, I cannot, I hope you enjoyed it. I could not have anticipated how much I was going to enjoy this conversation, honestly, and how much I was going to learn from you. So thank you again for reading your poem for us, for sharing your poetry with us, and for talking with us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank y'all so much. No, this was so much fun for me. I had a blast. So I'm
I'm
really
so glad to
grateful.
hear that.
I'm really grateful.
And also wanted to ask you if you wanted to share with any of our listeners what you're working on, what your plans are for the future, any projects you're excited about that you're working on.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit earlier that I'm working on that historical project about Deerfield, but I'm also writing a book about caretaking, but like that I did for my grandmother when I was like in high school. So that's gonna be out there soon too, fingers crossed. And then I've got a poem coming out in the Hopkins Review and 3 poems coming out in the Kenyon Review pretty soon. So yeah, that's what I'm up to next.
Awesome. Wow, that's a lot.
That's
You're doing a lot. That's so cool. Your thesis sounds very interesting and cool. I would honestly love to read that. It sounds very, very fascinating.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, no, thank you for sharing that with all of us. And we started this podcast to talk more as siblings around a shared interest, which is literature. And so we always try to leave our listeners with just the sign-off message, which is call someone that you love, tell them that you love them, tell them about something good that you've read recently. It should be Sydney's poems, any of them. They're all amazing. And until we talk again, stay classy, second pagers. We'll see you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Let's
guys.
go beyond.